inept kings, which is roughly 6 generations after the great kings, David and Solomon, King Omri saw religion only as valuable as what it could get you. He wasn't the only one for whom worship wasn't about devotion, but it was about control. It was a way to manipulate favor and manage people and reinforce power. To him, spiritual sincerity was of little interest. And when Omri died, his son Ahab inherited the throne. And he had the same attitude toward religion. Now, you remember how King Solomon had 700 wives, we're told? Now, it's not because he loved them all, practically couldn't love them all. He did it because they were useful. And so Ahab did what many others had done before. He married Jezebel, who was a wealthy princess from Sidon. That's a coastal city along the Mediterranean Sea. He did this to buy political peace through a diplomatic marriage. But perhaps Ahab didn't realize what he was getting in this deal, because she was certainly smarter and more principled than Ahab. She knew how to get things done that mattered to her, including not giving up her religious faith for her husband. And so she brought with her the gods of her people and a host of priests devoted to the god Baal. And like a husband who's eager to please, Ahab built altars to her god all over the place. It didn't matter to him. That is, so long as the alliance was strong and the palace remained calm. And under their reign, Samaria thrived. The markets were full of cedar wine and purple cloth and foreign spices. The merchants prospered, and the city gleamed with imperial success. But then came the fatal overreach, like the powerful often do. And Ahab saw a vineyard near his palace, and he wanted it for a garden. The owner of it, Naboth, refused to sell it. "This land is my father's inheritance," he said. "It belongs to my God." So a scheme was devised, cooked up some false charges, had a mock trial, and the guilty Naboth was stoned to death. Ahab got what he wanted. But not everyone was silent about it. This was an era where many prophets said whatever the king wanted to hear. But Elijah was unbought and unbossed. He stood up to King Ahab and raged, "You killed an innocent man. You stole his land. And here's what God has to say to you." Trigger warning if you don't like this kind of language. "In the same place where the dogs licked Naboth's blood, they'll lick yours too." And Ahab actually trembled at those words, because he realized this was a power he couldn't bribe or silence or charm. And Elijah pronounced judgment. "As Yahweh lives, there will be no more rain, not even dew, until I say so." And then he disappeared into hiding while the kingdom withered. The rain stopped falling, the rivers shriveled into dust, crops failed, and years passed while the people suffered. And then came a whisper from God. "It's time. Go back. Speak again." Now, as Elijah approached, Ahab fumed at the sight of him. "You again," he sneered. "You're the one who brought all this trouble on us." "I didn't create your trouble," Elijah shot back. "You did. You did it. You abandoned God. You bowed to Baal. But let's settle this. So gather your prophets, bring the people, and let's meet on Mount Carmel." And so they all came. The king on his golden chariot, the priests in their fine robes, and the people in rags. And Elijah, with his wild hair twisting in the wind, raised his voice and asked the people gathered, "How long will you limp between two opinions?" Love that line. How long will you limp between two opinions? "If Baal is God, then follow him. And if Yahweh is God, choose Yahweh." The people didn't say anything. didn't answer. So Elijah proposed a contest to the priests and prophets of Baal involving a sacrifice. They would make a sacrifice. There'd be 2 altars and 2 bulls, but no fire. Let the true God answer with the flame. So the prophets of Baal went first. They danced in circles and they chanted and danced until they were limping. Their feet were bleeding. And they called on his name from sunrise to twilight, but the sky remained clear and blue. Maybe Baal's out of town, or deep in thought, Elijah taunted, or busy, or maybe perhaps asleep. Still nothing. Not even a lukewarm stone. And finally in the morning, exhausted, they gave up. Then Elijah stepped up. He rebuilt the broken altar of Yahweh. He stacked the wood, placed the sacrifice, and then he drenched everything with water. I mean, bucket after bucket until the wood was soaked and the ground was just mud. Because he wasn't just trying to make a point, he was making it impossible. And then he prayed, O God of our ancestors, let it be known today that you are God. Turn their hearts back to you. And the blue sky darkened, and a wild, consuming fire fell and devoured the sacrifice, and the wood, and the stones, and even the dust. And for the first time in years, the people fell down and worshiped. Yahweh is God, they cried. Yahweh alone. Elijah won. He made his point. And if only it had ended there. Even prophets of justice are not free from vengeance. Elijah ordered all the prophets of Baal to be killed, 450 of them. And when Queen Jezebel heard, she was livid. And she sent a message with no subtlety, by this time tomorrow, you'll be dead. So Elijah fled into the wilderness, and he ran until he collapsed under a broom tree. And he prayed, it's enough, God. It's enough. Take my life. I'm no better than those before me. And just then, God sent an angel. Not a vision, not a pep talk. Just an angel with, you heard, some fresh bread and cold water. And said, get up and eat. This journey's too much for you. It wasn't, pull yourself together. The message was, stay hydrated and get some rest. So Elijah ate and rested, and then the angel came again. Here, have some more, and added, you're not done yet. And then with that strength, he walked for 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb. And he entered a cave, and God asked, what are you doing here? As though God didn't know. But perhaps Elijah didn't know. And next week, you'll hear what happens next. But today, consider this. After the spectacle, even after the thrill of winning that showdown and with the fire, Elijah felt defeated, depressed, and said, I've had enough, God. And God said, I understand. Have some bread. Some of us understand that. We might even be under a broom tree right now, saying, God, it's too much. I'm done. And that's okay. Because the trauma we've been experiencing is real. And good news, Elijah's story doesn't skip that part. God doesn't shame his despair and didn't say, get up and stop whining. Some bread, a little water, encouragement. And when he was ready, again, I love this line, now get going because you're not done. And when Elijah reached the cave, God showed up again. But not this time in a spectacle of fire, again, as you'll hear next week, and not in a violent wind or an earthquake. God showed up in the tenderness of a whisper. So how you doing today? Fear is kind of heavy. Rage is exhausting. We're not imagining what's happening in the country, in Los Angeles, right? It's real. And it's escalating, and it's coordinated, and it's dangerous. Tear gas and riot shields deployed not against threats, but against people crying out for justice or going about their business walking through a church parking lot. Did you read on Wednesday the Reverend Tanya Lopez, a Disciples of Christ pastor, our sister denomination, was in her office in Downey outside of L.A. She watched as 3 black SUVs with tinted windows pulled up to her church. And 5 men got out, with some wearing badges and tan bulletproof vests that said police, and they detained a man in front of her church. She ran outside and asked which agency they worked for, but they wouldn't answer. And as they forced the man into their vehicle, Reverend Lopez shouted instructions at to the man about his rights in Spanish, and as she did, an agent drew a rifle at the pastor's head. And the men laughed at her. And another pastor saw this happening and ran out to the parking lot and said, "This is church property, and we don't want you here." And the men laughed. And they said, "The whole country is our property. This is really happening." On Thursday night, those of us going on our civil rights pilgrimage in September discussed the movie Selma. After watching it, here's what was so striking, but perhaps not surprising, is that we've seen this before. I mean, not in this exact form, but in spirit. This week we saw farm workers out in green fields picking our vegetables and produce and watched as agents chased them down the rows. It was just too reminiscent of the news clips from Selma, also was real, of officers on horses racing through tear gas-soaked air toward protesters with billy clubs wrapped with barbed wire, tackling leaders who spoke out, who are speaking out, punishing laws for the protection of privilege, so much of it in the name of religion, the kind of religious observance of King Ahab, who saw it useful for control and power, but can this possibly be a source of devotion and spiritual sincerity? And the realization of all this just seems too clear, that this isn't the work of one man. This is the unfinished work of those who never accepted defeat after the Civil War, never made peace with the rights gained in the civil rights movement, never accepted the ideal of women or people with brown and black skin, queer people or people with disabilities as equals. And if all of this has been making you feel sick, good. Doesn't mean you're weak. It means you have a heart. It means Jesus matters to you. It means your spirit is still tender in a hardened world. And even Elijah cried, curled up under a broom tree, and begged to quit. And there will be more days when you feel as helpless as Elijah did. But you know what? You're not disqualified by your exhaustion or dismissed because of your despair. Because God calls the weary. God finds the ones out of breath, feeds them some fire-baked bread, and in the stillness, with a breeze on your neck, speaks with a voice loud enough to hear, "You are not alone. And you're not done yet." Yes, you're not done. You're exactly the one God is calling. So rise, weary prophets. Not because you want to, but because the world needs you, because despair cannot be the final word, and therefore silence is not an option. Because the God of justice isn't done. Not with us, not with you, not me, not with this country or any nation, and certainly not with the cause of freedom and the full equality of us all. But here, in the meantime, remember, all day and all night, God surrounds us with angels who bring some fresh bread and water. And in fact, maybe that could be your calling. You know, to be an angel of God, encouraging people to stay hydrated and get some rest. Amen.